For anyone who somehow doesn't know, we have a new pope. This new pope is an American who has named himself Leo the 14th. The new pope is from Chicago. So the fact that he was an American came as a surprise to just about everybody, because it had been common knowledge in the church that an American would never be pope. At least, not until America went into political decline, which maybe it kind of makes sense that we got an American pope right now. So, a lot of people are really fucking angry about Leo the 14th, from all around, right? The right is mad as hell, screaming woke pope, because he doesn't like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. The left is mad, screaming homophobic pope, which is kind of like saying water, like wet water, which I know that some of you fucking nerds are going to say, well, water isn't wet, it's the thing that makes things wet. But if you've got more than one goddamn isolated molecule of water, it doesn't matter, because if you've got more than one molecule of water, that water is touching water. So even by your weird little masturbatory nerd definition, water is still wet. But that's neither here nor there. The purpose of this video is not making fun of people who saying water isn't wet, as fun as that would be. The purpose of this video is to discuss how I think the new pope is going to be. Not in terms of making a good or bad value judgment, because as a Catholic, I'm not really inclined to try to judge the Pope, but in terms of more objective terms of how I think he's going to compare to Pope Francis. And the answer to that question seems to be that he's basically going to be a direct continuation of Pope Francis. Now, a lot of people think of Francis as this super progressive pope. He really wasn't. Nothing he did was really pushing the envelope of Catholic belief to any meaningful extent. What he did was he chose what to emphasize, right? And that's going to be a common theme, a theme that carries over into Pope Leo as well, I think. And I think he's going to choose to emphasize more or less the same things. So for Pope Francis, a big thing was the encouraging good treatment of immigrants, right? And this isn't progressive, this isn't woke, this is standard Catholic doctrine. This is welcome the stranger, biblical doctrine, right? But Pope Francis chose to focus a lot on it. And that's something that we can clearly expect to see from Pope Leo as well, because that is what he has done as a cardinal. He's, everyone's been joking about how he's been beefing with J.D. Vance on Twitter, which it is funny for the Pope to be a guy from Chicago who gets in Twitter beefs, but opposing mistreatment of immigrants is just standard Catholic doctrine. Pope Leo will choose to emphasize this aspect of doctrine just as Pope Francis did. So on workers' rights, Pope Francis, Catholic economic doctrine is rooted in distributism and is focused on the dignity and rights of workers. And Pope Francis chose to emphasize this, and Pope Leo has named himself Pope Leo after Pope Leo the 13th. He clearly intends to focus on this as well. One thing that the level of emphasis might be a little bit different, but the theology will remain just the same on, is LGBT rights. So Pope Francis, this is the thing that got him the most, I guess, credibility as a progressive among a lot of people is that he, for example, when asked about gay priests, he said, "Who am I to judge?" Well, you're the fucking Pope to judge, many people responded. But that was from early in his papacy, if I remember correctly, but he kept that kind of tenor throughout his whole tenure, right? Pope Francis was not woke on this issue. He did not support gay marriage. He regarded homosexuality as a sin, right? He was an Orthodox Catholic. The only actual woke pope options that were on the table were Tagle and Zuppi, and even they weren't like openly pro-gay marriage. They might have, if they had taken office, started moving things that way. But even Tagle and Zuppi aren't openly pro-gay marriage. It's the Catholic Church. And Francis wasn't either. And what Francis did emphasize, though, was the human dignity of LGBT people. That even if that criminalizing being LGBT is an affront to human dignity. These are the things that he emphasized. And he also emphasized allowing local dioceses to give non-marriage blessings to gay people. And Pope Leo seems to basically have the same views as Francis on these matters, but I think he will emphasize them a little bit less. Francis, for example, was more gung-ho about the local blessings thing, whereas Leo seems indifferent to it. And as far as in practice of what that means for the church, it basically means the same thing, because these blessings are decisions being made at a local level. So a pope that's in favor of them versus a pope that's indifferent to them doesn't directly change that decision that's being made at the local level. Now, a pope that's in favor of them might encourage local dioceses and things like that to make that decision. But Pope Leo is not going to end the practice. At least there's no reason right now to think that he will. So he might emphasize it less than Francis, but even on that issue, we're in practice going to get a continuation of Francis in Leo. So that's all the big controversial points that people talk about within the church. I mean, obviously, politically, another big controversial point that the church weighs in on is abortion, but that is not at all controversial within the church. There is no cardinal, no potential pope that would have made would have a different stance on that. That's a fully uncontroversial matter within the church, right? So that's why I didn't go over that when talking about the theology. But there's another big point about Leo that I think is going to be a very important continuation of Francis, one way or the other, is Leo, at least towards the end of Francis's tenure, was Pope Francis' top guy for appointing cardinals and bishops. Which I saw a very funny joke about this, like, oh, of course the Chicago guy got the papacy by appointing the people who picked him. Like, it's, it is funny to think of it as Chicago politics, but I don't think that's why he was picked. At the end of the video, I'll talk very briefly about why I think he was picked. But Pope Francis, while he was not actually a progressive, he appointed a lot of cardinals who are. He appointed Tagle, he appointed Zuppi, he appointed a lot of people like them. he appointed a lot of people more progressive than himself theologically to cardinal positions. And given that Pope Leo holds basically all the same views as Pope Francis, and given that he was directly involved with the appointments of bishops and cardinals at a high level under Francis, it stands to reason that he's going to do the same. And Pope Leo is only 69 years old. That's a baby in papal terms. So he might be the Pope for 20 years, making very progressive appointments to the College of Cardinals. So while Pope Leo is not the woke Pope, there is a very good chance that sometime around 2045 or so, the next Pope might well be the woke Pope because of the appointments that he'll make. So for anyone who wants to see more acceptance within the church, as I do, that's a very exciting notion, right? So on balance, that's what I think of how Leo is going to run the church. As to why he was picked, as I mentioned earlier, I think that while I doubt this was all of it, because as much as we love to think of ourselves as such, and as much as I sometimes jokingly say we are, when I get feeling some bravado, America is not the only country in the world that matters. But I think if you think that a never Trump Republican becoming the first American Pope during Donald Trump's presidency, that the church has been so critical of, is a coincidence, and those are totally unrelated things, I think that you're being a little bit naive. I think that it's very clear that the church wants to humble Donald Trump with this choice. And that was, again, not necessarily all of it, not even necessarily most of it, but a part of the consideration in the choice of Pope Leo. So that's about all I have to say about that.